All right, let's get started, please. Andy. Rayton. Aaron. Where were you last week? Aaron, where were you last week? You know you missed a lot of classes. Cheryl, Shelley, Alice, Helen, Arius, Ruby, Bernardus, Jenny, Emily, Annabelle, Cindy, Nikita, Billy Song, Chelsea, Wilbert. Wilbert.
In the toilet, sir.
Huh?
In the bathroom.
Wilbert. Yeah, maybe they got earlier to go to the bathroom earlier, be here on time. Felicia. Valen. Amelia. Juan. Christopher. Wesley. Greta still at quarantine? Yeah. Winston. Audrey. Jocelyn. Viva. Yang. Still on 14. Yeah, so it's room 3 people left. Miller. Hey, Miller. Oh, I imagine you're all very tired from international week. Some more than others, probably. All right, let's get started. You'll also notice that your final project is on your e-learning. I see 7 people have looked. So that's on you. Yeah? I can't make you check e-learning, but the sooner you check e-learning, the sooner you're going to know what your project is, the sooner you can start working on it. All right, so we're going to start looking at Chinese and Taiwanese ingredients today. You don't necessarily need to follow along in your book, as your book and PowerPoint are identical matches, so whatever you find easiest, but there's not very many photos in your book because we can't. If there's photos in your book would be this big, right? So all the photos will be in a PowerPoint, which are all going up onto your e-learning anyways, so then you can just download them, keep them from there, and use them. Hopefully we can get through this real quick because you should already know a lot of the ingredients, right? Because you've already taken basic Chinese, right? This semester, so you should know most of these ingredients. So hopefully we can buzz through this very quickly. And I don't think we'll finish Japan and Korea today, but at least we can get into it. So let's just get going right away. So China is one of the most ancient civilizations, right? I mean, we talk about ancient culture, we talk about Egypt, Aztecs, Mayans, things like that. China also has a long lineage, dating back thousands of years. They also have a very diverse cuisine, right? Similar to how Italy is, very regional. If you go to the north, it's one style. If you go to the center, it's one style. If you go to the south, it's very different. China is exactly the same. If you go to the north, it's one style. You go to the east, it's a different style. You go to the center, it's a different style. The southern Chinese food is completely different. And then you go to the western or the eastern part of China, it's vastly different. Okay, so they have a very strong regionality in their cuisine. China is also one of the world leaders in agriculture now, meaning that they produce a lot of the food products that we eat worldwide. Okay, a lot of people think, when they think of China, they just think of, you know, sort of substandard computer parts, cell phone parts, yeah, I don't know, cheap toys, underwear, but actually they produce a vast majority of the products we use in our daily lives, and a lot of them you don't even know it. So, we'll just buzz through this. Taiwan has had many influences throughout its history. Obviously, Taiwan was, depending on who you listen to, Taiwan was settled on by sort of Australasian, Polynesian travelers originally. It was settled in by China, it was controlled by Japan, it was controlled by the Netherlands even before Japan got here, even before the Chinese got here, which is where it's got its name from, Formosa, right? You know, Taiwan's called Formosa, right? That's a Dutch name, right? So that name that it uses still to this day was given to it by the Dutch. And if you look in Taipei, if you go to Taipei, you'll see many influences, especially up in like Danshui area, of the Dutch colonies that used to be there. All the old castles and stuff like that in the mouth of the Danshui River are all old Dutch construction. So you can see a lot of the lineage from the Dutch are still here, a lot of the lineage from the Japanese are still here, and then of course you have the Chinese influence after the Civil War, when, you know, where we are now. Taiwan has a very diverse food culture. In fact, nowadays Taiwan is considered one of the top destinations for foodies. That term is completely ridiculous. Everyone's a foodie because guess what? We all need food to live. But now Taiwan and Taiwanese food is really high up on a lot of travel guides' destinations to go to for food because it's so diverse and it's quite a bit different than Chinese food. When I first moved to Taiwan a long time ago, I was very ignorant to, I just thought like Taiwanese food, like Chinese food, right, whatever, right? But it's quite a bit different. There are a lot of similarities, right? There's a lot of influences from like Fujian, like southern Taiwan, or southern China here. There's also some influences from Sichuan cuisine here. There's some influences from Cantonese cuisine here, but Taiwanese cuisine definitely has its own unique, distinct style of cooking, which is quite nice. Anyways, adzuki or red beans, this is a common ingredient. I'm sure all the Chinese people know this. You get this on shaved ice all the time, like red beans and ice, or shaved milk ice and red beans. So this is called an adzuki bean or a common red bean. So this is really, really common, not just in China and Taiwan, but it's also used throughout a lot of places in Asia. But it is native to China. And it's commonly used either in sweet preparations, as I mentioned before, like shaved milk ice or shaved ice with red beans, or it's used as a filling, a sweet filling. You know, you get those fish at the market, the little, you know, my wife loves them. I can have about 2 bites and then I'm like, all right, I'm good. She can eat like 15 of them. It's amazing. I've never seen anybody eat so many of them. It's mind-boggling, actually. It's also impressive. So they're used a lot for sweet fillings in Chinese buns. They're used a lot for sweet topping. They're also used a lot in for fermentation, for coloring, for things like tasa pork. These are used a lot in for making the red color after they've been fermented. So adzuki beans are very, very common and used in many aspects of Taiwanese cuisine and also Chinese cuisine. As you can see here, right? You guys all know this, yeah? You know how to make these? Oh, you will though, right? In Chinese pastry class. Myself and Professor, do you know Professor Doug? Yeah, but he doesn't teach you, right? So we took, myself and Professor Doug took a master class on how to, so we're like certified how to make Chinese pastries. So we can make pineapple cakes and moon cakes and sun cakes and all these other wedding cakes and stuff like that. I never, again, when I moved here, I was, you know, I was like, they're all right. But now that I know how to make them, and now that I've eaten them more, I appreciate them more. Not that I would sit down and eat a whole box of them, right? Because that would be excessive, to say the least. But I definitely have a deeper appreciation for them now. So it's nice to experience things and to learn things like that. So that's adzuki beans. Bamboo, this is a species of 1,500 or more different types of plants. Again, not native to any particular area in Asia, but it is used the most by Chinese people because they have the biggest population. So I included it in the Chinese section. There's more than 1,500 types of bamboo, but not all of them are edible, right? A lot of them are used in textiles, for example, in chopsticks or rolling mats or tatami mats, things like that. But there's only about 100 or so that are used for actual edible reasons. These are also very common in many types of Chinese cuisine, many types of Taiwanese cuisine. This one here is called kola bamboo, which is very common in Taiwan. It's a short shoot like this, but it's actually not in the bamboo family. It's a water lily family or grass family, but it's called kola bamboo in Taiwanese cuisine or Chinese cuisine. This is probably the most common method of, one of the most common methods, which I can't stand, is steamed bamboo with mayonnaise on top of it, right? Sometimes you get sprinkles, right? Or you get the red and pink sprinkles on it. I love the bamboo, but the mayonnaise I just scrape off because I can't eat that much mayonnaise. But it's used commonly, very common in soup as well, right? Very, very common ingredient in soup or fried. So very, very important, integral part. Bamboo would be to Chinese cuisine what potatoes are to South American cuisine, right? It's a staple cuisine, it's a staple food, right? It's used in extensive amounts in Chinese and Taiwanese cuisine. Basil, again, not native to either China or Taiwan, but it does play a large part in the cooking in both Chinese and Taiwanese cuisine. You see it used a lot more nowadays. The species of basil that they use in Taiwan and in China is closer to Thai basil than the Italian style basil. They're not the same kind. Sweet Italian basil and the basil they use in Thailand for cooking are two totally different types of basil. The type they use in Taiwan would be similar to a Thai style basil. Okay? I'm sure you guys all know this, sanbeiji, right? So sanbeiji, you made sanbeiji, right? In Chinese class? Yeah? No? What's more basic than the most quintessential, one of the most quintessential Taiwanese dishes, other than yoro mian, is probably sanbeiji, right? So sanbeiji just means 3 cups of chicken, right? San, 3, bei, cup, ji, chicken. And it's just equal parts of sesame oil, soy sauce, and sugar. Or, sorry, rice wine. So basil plays an integral part in this dish, but it's also used in a lot of other dishes throughout Chinese and Taiwanese cuisine. Okay, but it's more akin to Thai basil than sweet Italian basil. Though it's not native to these areas, I used it in this PowerPoint because it is used a lot in the cooking. Okay? Yeah. Bitter melon, also not native to Asia, it's from Africa. Again, one of the dishes, one of the ingredients that I was not, when I first moved to Taiwan, I was like, ugh. But now I love it with salty egg, right? Preserved egg and bitter melon. It's like probably my favorite thing to eat. So this particular melon, like most melons, was actually native to Central Africa, okay, the Sahara, the Sub-Saharan area. However, it was brought over to Asia through spice trading, and now plays a very, very big role in Chinese cuisine and Taiwanese cuisine, as well as many other Asian cuisines. It's very, very common to salt this melon for a short time before cooking, and that removes some of the bitterness. So a lot of these, that's the reason it gets its name, bitter melon, because if you eat it straight, it's quite bitter. So it's very, very common, like I don't need to tell you this, but very, very common to salt the melon first. That draws out all that bitter water, and then it's cooked, usually into something else. Very common ingredient in soup, and also a very common vegetable side dish. Okay, as I mentioned before, one of my favorite dishes to eat is bitter melon with salted duck egg. That together, those two together is just a... My wife can eat red beans, I can eat bitter melon with egg. I get one just for myself, right? I protect that. Also used in traditional Chinese medicine, okay? Bitter melon, dried bitter melon, some of that is used in the traditional Chinese medicine approach. So very integral part, and there it is, my single favorite dish probably, bitter melon and salted egg yolk. Classic Taiwanese Chinese dish. Amazing combination and simplicity. 2 ingredients. I mean, there's sesame oil and stuff, but I mean, really 2 ingredients and just an amazing dish. Every kind of flavor you want, there's saltiness, there's richness, there's bitterness, there's sweetness. I mean, it's really amazing. So that's bitter melon. Black beans. So this is not the same type of black bean, obviously, that they would use in South America. This is a soybean, right? So the black soybean. This is really commonly fermented. So the same soybean that's used to make soy sauce would also be fermented or salted until it's shriveled up and become very, very strong, very potent. This is used as a flavoring ingredient, either in sauces or added to dishes like stir-fried dishes. For example, oysters. Very common dish here is oysters with black beans. Okay? These should never be eaten straight, okay? Because they're very, very salty. So always soak them in warm water first to loosen them up and extract a lot of that salt. Dump it out a couple times to refresh the water, and then add it to your sauce or add it to your dish. But never add them straight, because they'll be incredibly salty. It'll be horrible to eat. So that's the fermented black bean. Bok choy, this is a cultivar of cabbage. So this is another integral part or very staple ingredient used in many, many Taiwanese dishes. It's really commonly used just as a garnish or an additive to a dish. It's either can be steamed or fried. It's not really, they don't make, bok choy isn't used to make specific dishes, really. It's just used as a vegetable, okay? Unlike, say, bitter melon is used to make bitter melon and egg or bitter melon soup. Bok choy is used mostly as just a green, a vegetable to add to something, okay? There's lots of different types in the family of bok choy. There's like tzu choy and tao choy and all this other stuff, but they're usually added just as a vegetable, not a specific main focal point, okay? It's really common to see this when you're eating something like beef noodle soup. They'll just boil it and then put it on the side, okay? And again, this is for color, for vegetable, that vegetable component that people think they have to have. But yes, bok choy, part of the cabbage family. Carp, this is a species of fish that is common globally. However, I included it in this particular PowerPoint because Taiwan and China both have very large carp farming industries, so they raise a lot of carp. It's also very commonly used in Chinese cuisine and in Taiwanese cuisine. It's really, really big economically for both Taiwan and China. This is a really common fish you'll see steamed whole, okay? Or it'll be processed into things like fish balls for fish ball soup, or dumplings, so fish dumplings. So this can be used as a filling, or it can be used as a whole fish, okay? In a lot of other countries, so for example like in Africa or the US, this particular type of carp that's used in China and Taiwan is considered an invasive species, meaning that it goes into an area and it kind of takes over. Okay, it multiplies rapidly. It's a very aggressive fish, so it forces other fish out of the area. It's quite a large, can be quite a large fish. And so it goes into the other areas and it kind of dominates the ecosystem there. So in some parts of Africa, some parts of the US, they've had a difficult time controlling this species of carp. But it is a very common fish here and very, very highly farmed. The specific species used in China and Taiwan is called the mud carp, okay? Because it usually hangs out around the muddy area of the water where it can stay kind of protected and hidden. Chinese broccoli. It's a species also belonging to the cabbage family, although in the West we call it Chinese broccoli, like Jielanhua, I think it is. Yeah. Yeah. So in Taiwan we call it Jielanhua, which is like flowering. If I'm correct, flowering. Is that right? Flowering something. So we would call this in the West Chinese broccoli. Here you would call it Jielanhua. It's very similar to broccoli in that the stem part is quite woody or quite fibrous and needs to be cooked quite thoroughly in order to make it tender. So when I cook it, I often separate the top and the bottom. Okay. Sometimes here you'll see it cooked whole, although then either the top is really overcooked and the bottom is undercooked. So I like to split it and cook it separately so that you can cook them both, so they're both nice. It's a little more work, but the end product is better. Again, this is a member of the cabbage family, okay? Remember, the cabbage family is a very, very large family. We've already talked about many products that belong to the cabbage family. This is another one that belongs to the cabbage family. So you might want to remember that for your test, because there's a reason I'm going on and on about it. Chinese cooking wine, also known as Shaoxing wine or Shaoxing. So this is a fairly strong cooking wine. This is made from fermented rice. This is not something you want to drink. So like drinking wine and drinking rice wine in Taiwan would be like Galian, right? Although I can't really drink Galian, like that's a little too much for me. It's incredibly strong. Have you ever seen the commercials for Galian? You know, it's like some guy wearing like a fancy suit, has a little glass of rice wine. You know, I don't know what he's drinking, but the first time I tried Galian, I almost jumped off the balcony. It was very strong. So Shaoxing wine or Shaoxing cooking wine is used for making a lot of different cooking dishes. It's used to flame up ingredients or flambe ingredients. It's used as a flavoring additive. It's got a very strong, distinct smell, very strong, distinct flavor. Have you made Shaoxing ji? Yeah? Shaoxing chicken? What have you made in basic Chinese cooking? I'm curious, like, no sanbei ji, mapo tofu. Swantian churro.
Last year we did mapo tofu.
Last year. I mean, the last year you were here.
Yes.
Yes, but this is their first year, and first semester, so they couldn't have done it last year. Wow. Well, I would have thought these are all like quintessential dishes that, okay, well, whatever. Anyways, Shaoxing wine is not to be confused with something like Nijiu, which is like a white drinking wine, right? This is only for cooking, okay? You would not want to drink this. It's not, there are very, very good Shaoxing wines that you could drink, but it's a very acquired taste. But predominantly, this product is very cheap. You buy it in any store for a very, very cheap amount, and it's used specifically for cooking, not for drinking. Unless that person doesn't shut up, they're going to get it. So that's Shaoxing wine, okay? And then this you would know, right? This is Shaoxing chicken or Shaoxing ji. So this is a rolled chicken that's marinated in Shaoxing wine and then poached, and then it's cooled overnight, so it's very gelatinous. Again, also one of my favorite dishes to eat. I absolutely love it. It's got a very, very unique taste. So, will you make this in your Chinese cooking? Oh, that's weird. Conpoy. So, you guys should all know this. At least most of you should. This is dried scallop, okay, called conpoy. This is a really, really important ingredient in a lot of different Chinese cuisines. Probably the most iconic thing that's used, that conpoy is used for, is making XO sauce. Okay, so this is XO sauce. It was created in Hong Kong, okay, a long time ago. And XO sauce is a really, really important seasoning sauce used in Chinese cooking. It's made usually of dried shrimp, dried fish. The very expensive ones, more expensive ones, always have a higher level of dried scallop in them. So you can get cheap XO sauce, which is mostly dried shrimp and dried fish, and then you can get more expensive XO sauce, which has a high level of dried scallop or conpoy. Okay? And again, not that conpoy is only used in Chinese cooking, it's used in other cuisines in Asia, but it is a very, very integral role in Chinese cooking. Okay? Daikon, or lobo, right? You guys are going, I think, on a field trip next week? Or is that 2A maybe? Oh, that's 2A. Never mind. Well, next year you guys will go on the same trip. I guess, I don't know. They seem to go on the same trip every year. Anyways, lobo, or as we call it in English, daikon, is a member of the radish family. Okay? So this is a white radish. The Chinese name, I believe, is white carrot, right? Luobo, right? Although that's not really, well, I'm not going to say it's an inaccurate name because it's a Chinese name, right? But it's not a member of the carrot family. It's actually a member of the radish family. So the name white carrot is a bit misleading because it's not part of the carrot family. A parsnip, which we talked about before, when we talked about German cooking that looks like a carrot, that would be more appropriate to call a white carrot. But there are white carrots, actual white carrots. So, anyways, the lobo or white radish, or daikon as we call it in English, is again a very, very staple ingredient in Taiwanese cuisine, in Chinese cuisine. It's used a lot in different Asian cuisines, right? Japanese cuisine is used heavily. Korean cuisine is used extensively, except a different variety is used in Korean cuisine, which we'll get to later. Same family, it's the white radish family, but it's very different looking in Korea. This is also really, really popular. It's used in soups, it's used in fillings, it's used in fermented, salted, it's used in a variety of different dishes here. Probably the most common, not the most common, but one of the most recognizable dishes is radish cake or lobo gao, right? That's a really common food that's served at breakfast, pretty much any time. You can get it at breakfast, you can get it at lunch, you can get it at dinner, although I don't know if I would eat it 3 times a day. But it is really good. So that's probably one of the most common uses of daikon is to make lobo gao. Okay, because that's a very, again, staple product, staple food in Taiwan. Very, very common thing to find. There we have it right there, lobo gao. Have you made this in Chinese cooking? I'm just going to stop asking. I'm going to stop asking. Dried chilies. So these are, again, chilies are used in a lot of Chinese cooking, especially in Sichuan cuisine. Sichuan cuisine being a northern style cuisine, which is very spicy. Typically it's spicy, right? Not everything in Sichuan cuisine is spicy, but they are known for using a high amount of chilies in their cooking. Again, chilies don't come from chilies don't come from Asia, they come from South America. And they were brought over to China, and they were sort of propagated and made into their own styles of chilies. So there's a few different types of chilies they use in Chinese cuisine and in Taiwanese cuisine. You can see there's a little list here with different ones on there, right? The bullet, Yida, and Sanying. And again, this will be on your e-learning, so you're free to download this PowerPoint and study the photos at your own pace. Again, one of the most famous dishes, one of my favorite dishes, again, is called Gong Bao Ji, or Gong Bao Ji Dian, which is Chinese style, basically fried chicken and chilies, right? With peanuts and green onions and garlic and pretty much everything good you'd ever want, right? It's got all the good things. Chicken, peanuts, garlic, chilies, I don't know. That's all you really need in life. So again, chilies, not indigenous to the area, but they were brought over here from South America, and then they integrated themselves into the cuisine, especially in northern areas where it's colder, right? Because you eat chilies and your body naturally gets warm, okay? 5-spice powder, also called Chinese spice powder. So again, this is a really important part of Chinese cooking. This is used to marinate meats. It's also used to flavor soups. It has a very sort of strong medicinal style taste. I'm sure you must have used this in Chinese cooking. Maybe? I hope. I see like tons of it downstairs, so somebody's using it. There's like 50 pounds of it downstairs. So usually this mixture contains cinnamon, cloves, star anise, Sichuan peppercorns, and fennel. Although there are slight variations to it, but those are the 5 main spices that go into it. Okay? Usually Chinese cinnamon, not true cinnamon, right? We talked about cinnamon before, I believe, where there's two main types, right? There's Ceylon cinnamon and cassia. Ceylon being true cinnamon and cassia being Chinese cinnamon, which is a lower quality than Ceylon cinnamon, which is considered the one true cinnamon. Anyway, so it's a very, very common spice used in a lot of different applications in Chinese cooking, from marination to flavoring. So it's used quite extensively in Chinese cooking. Garlic, again, not native to China. However, I included it here because China produces roughly 80% of the world's garlic. Think about that. 80% of the garlic used on Earth comes from China. So you can see in the graph here, the next closest country is India. And you can see how much the difference is in garlic production annually between China being number 1 and India being number 2. It's staggering how much garlic China produces. And again, garlic not native to here, but it was brought over here for Europe and for the Mediterranean, and of course has integrated itself into the cuisine of many places, not just China and Taiwan, but all over Asia and basically worldwide. I mean, garlic is probably the most used single thing other than maybe onions. Ginger, also not native to China or Taiwan. This is a flowering plant. It's in the same family as turmeric, for example. So it's a tuberous plant, meaning that again it grows underground and then it flowers up throughout the ground as we use the tuber from underground. Ginger is used in sort of kind of 2 different ways in Asian cooking. What I find anyways, they use either young ginger or old ginger. Okay, so usually it's either freshly picked and they use it right away, so it has a much more subtle taste. It's got the same sort of lemony kind of spicy taste, but it's much more subtle. It's not so intense, you know. Or they let it age, and it gets really, really dark yellow and very, very much harder. And then it's got a much stronger taste, when you eat it, it's got a very intense taste. So depending on how they're going to cook it, or depending on what dish they're making, in Chinese cooking or Taiwanese cooking, they'll either use young ginger. For example, in soups, a lot of soups use young ginger because they want a very delicate flavor. For example, making a fish soup or clam soup, they'll use young ginger because they want just a light taste of ginger. Or something like sanbeiji, they use old ginger because they want a very intense, pungent taste because there's a lot of big flavors in sanbeiji, as an example. One of the more common uses as well for ginger, especially here, is with xiaolongbao, right? Xiaolongbao, the dumplings. Very common, very famous. Black vinegar, a little soy, maybe a little sesame oil, and ginger. And you dip your xiaolongbao in there and then eat it. I often will pick up all the ginger and eat it and then ask for more because I like ginger. Goji berries, also called wolfberries. Okay, this is another native fruit to parts of China. It's a shrub. It's a fruit-growing shrub, so it's basically like a bush that grows small red berries. These small red berries are dried, as you can see here, dried out and then used in teas, in medicine, in soups. You'll often see them, for example, in chicken soup here. They call it like double boiled chicken soup, and it's usually got jujubes in it, and ginger and garlic and goji berries. Okay? Very, very common ingredient used in many different types of dishes here, especially like ginseng, chicken and ginseng soup. Very, very common to find goji berries inside of that. Hoisin sauce. So this is another really common ingredient used in Cantonese cuisine and in mainland Chinese cuisine. It's also very common to see it used in Taiwan, especially for fried dishes. You know, fried noodles will often have some hoisin sauce in it. So this is a Cantonese cuisine ingredient that was imported in after the war. This is made from fermented soybeans and then usually fennel, chili, garlic, fine spice, vinegar, depending on the brand, whoever makes it, right? So this is used also for glazing meats when they're barbecuing meats or even fish. So it's a really multi-purpose flavoring sauce. It's used in a lot of applications. So that's a Cantonese ingredient. Japonica rice. This is a rice variety native to China. It's short grained and can be found in 4 main groups: glutinous, aromatic, black, and green. And of those 2 growing types, there's temperate and tropical. So one grows in temperate climates, one grows in tropical climates, so hotter climates. And these are the 4 main types right here. Okay, glutinous, aromatic, black, and green or red. So japonica rice, although I don't know why it's called japonica rice, because that makes it sound like it's from Japan, but it's actually native to China. Kumquat, this is a small fruit. This is native to China and East Asia. Kumquats are used in a lot of different applications here. It's quite common to see them salted and preserved and then used after. They're also a very common ingredient around Lunar New Year or Chinese New Year as a insert for a cake or a fruit filling for a pastry. So these are kumquats here. And they're only about the size of a golf ball or so, not very big. Loquat is another fruit growing tree. Again, this is native, it's an evergreen tree, native to China. Produces a small yellow fruit, yellow or orange fruit. It's sweet, citrus-like. Very, very common to a small orange or a lemon, although it has a very, very mild acidity, not like a lemon. So it's quite a bit sweeter. That's what a loquat looks like when it comes off the tree. It's usually got 2 or 3 black seeds that are inedible, of course. So you're going to want to remove those before you process it or before you eat it. So that's called a loquat. Lotus. This is native to many areas around Asia. The lotus is really, really prized in Chinese culture and in Chinese cuisine. It's a symbolic plant, usually used in different sort of religious applications or deity applications. It's sort of a symbol of long life or longevity. Many parts of the plants are used, either for medicinal purposes or for culinary uses. The lotus leaf, for example, are used a lot for wrapping around things. You'll often see different rice dishes or steamed dishes wrapped in lotus roots, or lotus leaves, sorry. So this is the root here, lotus root. Very, very unique, very, very easy to recognize because of the holes in the middle, right? There's basically only 1 or 2 vegetables on earth that have that type of structure inside, okay, the holes running through them. The lotus leaves, so the root is used in a lot of different applications here. It can be steamed, it can be sliced, it can be fried, it can be mashed, it can be used in fillings. And the leaves themselves can be used, very, very common to fill them with rice and with different ingredients inside it, like pork and salted egg yolk, and then wrapped in lotus leaf and then steamed. That's really common around Lunar New Year and different holidays. Also very common for weddings. When you go to a wedding at a round table, you'll often find some sort of dish wrapped in lotus leaves. Mandarin orange. This is a variety of orange native to China and northern India, although it's mostly commonly associated with Chinese culture and Japanese culture. Mandarin oranges are very, very small oranges. They are incredibly sweet. They have a very easy to peel skin that comes off very easily, which makes them very popular for eating because they're very portable, very easy to peel. They have virtually no seeds. As they get older, if they aren't picked within the right time of the season, then they start to develop seeds in the middle, which then they're not quite as good then. Usually they're picked quite young, so they're easy to peel. They have a very thin skin, low amount of bitterness. They're also really common around holiday or festival times. You know, certain calendar times that are considered special. Like for us in the West, we for some reason give mandarin oranges to people at Christmas time. I don't know. Yeah, I don't know. I'm not sure what the deal is. There's no correlation between Chinese culture and Christmas, right? Like Santa Claus. I don't know. But apparently that's like a thing to give people mandarins at Christmas time. But they are given a lot in Asian cultures around holidays, just not Christmas, because that's not a holiday here. Yeah. Mandarin oranges, also one of my favorites. Master stock, I'm sure you must have made this class. Master stock is a really integral part of Chinese cooking, specifically Cantonese and Fujian cuisine. This is made, this is sort of the stock they use for a lot of different meat dishes, a lot of different soup dishes. It's one of the more common things they use as a base for sauces and soups, and for braising dishes in it. This is a common ingredient. Usually it includes meat and bones from a variety of different animals, quite commonly chicken bones and pork bones. The reason that this is interesting because in the Western culinary side, we don't mix. We either have chicken stock, we have beef stock, we have fish stock, we have pork stock. We don't really mix bones, okay? But master stock usually includes a variety of different bones to produce sort of a very rich flavor. It's also got some soy sauce in it, rock sugar in it, the large rock sugar crystals. It's usually got Shaoxing wine or some wine element to it. And then it's usually got a lot of aromatics in it, like onions, sour anise, cinnamon, garlic, Sichuan peppercorns, dried mushrooms, like dried shiitake mushrooms. So it's got a lot more aromatics in it than Western style stocks. But master stock is used extensively in Chinese kitchens. Milkfish, this is another common fish around the world. Again, I included it here because milkfish is used a lot in Chinese cooking. It's used a lot in Taiwanese cooking. It's farmed heavily around Asia. Taiwan, Indonesia, and the Philippines are the world leaders in milkfish farming. So that's a milkfish there. So milkfish is a fairly small fish. It's got very, very silver skin. It's got white flesh, very, very mild. It's got a very, very white flesh. In fact, that's why it's called milkfish, because the meat is incredibly white. Most fish, when we talk about fish, we say like the fish has a white skin or white flesh. It's not really truly white. It's more like an off-white or pinkish white. But milkfish is like white as your jacket. I mean, it's white. Okay. It's also very, very popular for that reason because it's very mild in taste. It's not really fishy. It doesn't have a muddy taste like some carps do. So it's really, really popular and very, very common throughout Taiwan and also throughout China. As I mentioned before, Taiwan is one of the world leaders in milkfish farming. It is a species of a Chaninae family of fish. So there used to be two members of this family. Okay, there is this fish and another one. This is the only remaining fish left in that family. The other one's gone extinct now. So that's why these are farmed now, because they're worried about extinction as well for the milkfish. Mushrooms, oh boy. So mushrooms, obviously there's a variety of mushrooms used throughout Asia. There's a variety of mushrooms used throughout the world. During the 1960s and 1980s, actually Taiwan was one of the world leaders in canned mushrooms to the United States, which is an odd fact, really, if you think about it. So 80% of the mushrooms that are canned and sent to the United States for about 20 years or 30 years all came from Taiwan. They had a huge mushroom canning industry here. So we're going to go through just a few of the mushrooms that are used in the cooking here. Obviously, there's way too many to we'd be here for 2 months just talking about mushrooms if we had to talk about all of them. So we're going to talk about some of them that are more common. When I say common, I mean commercially common. You can go to the grocery store and buy them, right? There's obviously lots of kinds that are used in cooking, but they're more industrial or professional use only, right? So we'll get into a few of the more common ones that you would find. So oyster mushrooms. This is a really common mushroom here. You can find it at most day markets here. You can also find it at most supermarkets here. Oyster mushrooms grow in large clumps. So unlike a lot of mushrooms that grow in singular pieces, oyster mushrooms grow from one stem that has many shoots. And they usually grow in very, very big bulbs or very big packets. They have quite a watery flesh. They have a mild taste, so they're popular because they're not too strong. They have a soft brown cap, so it's not too dark in color. So it's sort of a grayish, brownish color. The size obviously can vary depending on how old they are. The older they get, the bigger they get, right? And these are one of the more cultivated mushrooms used throughout Chinese cooking. They're very heavily cultivated. shiitake mushrooms. These are native to East Asia, in particular China. Again, this plays an important role in Chinese cuisine. They're often used fresh, okay, or they are often used dried. When they're used fresh, they're used mostly as again, sort of like bok choy. They're used as sort of a side dish. You know, like just adding something to a dish, they use a shiitake mushroom. But when they want to impart a very strong mushroom flavor to something, they'll use dried shiitake mushrooms. Again, these are used extensively in Chinese cooking, in soups, in sauces, in medicine even. They're also used in what's called the rice dumplings, zongzi. Zongzi. You know, you get it at the Dragon Boat, you know what's called? Zongzi, right? Yeah, so zongzi, have you guys had zongzi? Everyone? Never? Maybe? Zongzi is like a rice, not a rice dumpling, they call it rice dumplings, but that doesn't make sense to me, it's not wrapped in anything. Basically, it's a mixture of sticky rice, glutinous rice, with sometimes water chestnuts, sometimes soaked shiitake mushrooms, maybe some pork belly, yeah, a variety of different things, and it's packed into a certain shape, like usually a pyramid, and then it's wrapped in a leaf, and then it's steamed. It's really common at Dragon Boat Festival to give these as gifts. They're usually tied up with string, so it's like nunchucks, you know? It's similar to a tamale, yeah. I mean, it's like, it's much bigger, and it's really sticky rice. It's usually eaten with chili sauce. So very, very common to eat zongzi with like a red chili sauce. You had it for you? Okay. Perfect. Then we all know what it is. They're excellent. I mean, I love them. I can't eat a lot of them because they're very filling, right? Like one, and I'm good. My wife's like, all right, I'll finish the rest of it. I'm like, here you go, do it. At any rate, so the dried shiitake is used a lot in that application. They'll soak them overnight so they become soft again. They'll save that liquid either for cooking the rice or something else like Master Soft, and then they'll put that soaked mushroom into the zongzi. Wood ear mushroom, also called black fungus, the common mushroom. Again, this is something that's used extensively in different types of dishes here. They'll throw it into stir fries, they'll put it into soups, they'll even use it as a salad or yeah, I guess a salad's the best way to describe it. So sometimes you go to a restaurant, for example, like a beef noodle soup restaurant, and you might see a big sort of, not a fridge case, but just a kind of open case. I wish it was refrigerated. And then inside there, there'll be all kinds of different small dishes, like pickled cucumbers, pig ear, sliced kelp, steamed or soy eggs, and then sometimes you might see this wood ear mushroom marinated or with some sort of simple dressing on it, and that's served as a side dish there. So this is used in a lot of different applications. It's also used in Chinese medicine. When it's been dried like this, they often use it in different Chinese medicines in sort of a little packet that you might make into a tea or something like that if you have a certain illness. Oyster sauce, again, very, very widely used sauce in Chinese cuisine, also in Taiwanese cuisine. This brand here, Li Kong Ki, world leader in many, many different sauces. They also created the first oyster sauce. This guy actually invented oyster sauce. So I think it was in Hong Kong or in China. I think it was Hong Kong. But he was cooking a pot of oysters, okay? A bunch of oysters, he put into a pot to cook them, then he went off and did something. I don't know, he wasn't doing TikTok because they didn't have TikTok back then. But he was doing something. He was doing like the OG TikTok, like maybe an abacus or something. And he left the oysters to cook, and then all the liquid came out, and then the oysters kind of got more and more brown, and then when he came back, he was like, "Whoa, what is this?" And it was this sort of like thick black sauce. Not quite to like what it is now, but similar, right? And he tasted it, and he's like, "Wow, this is pretty good. It's pretty all right." You know? Then he gave some to other people, and they're like, "Wow, that's really good." He's like, "Yeah, I know." Like, how'd you make it? He's like, "Don't worry about that." And then he basically started his company on the back of hoisin sauce and oyster sauce. And nowadays, of course, oysters are quite expensive, right? So they don't make it, you know, this sauce is definitely different from the original, right? But nowadays they add things like sugar and salt and cornstarch and MSG to sort of get that similar taste, right? But the basis of the sauce and the way it gets its name is because the guy literally burnt a bunch of oysters and was like, that's really good. He was probably really embarrassed, but he just convinced everyone it was really good, trust me. You know? But at any rate, that's the ethos of this sauce. That's how it came to be, from the Li Kung Ki family. Pork. So again, pork is widely consumed all over the world. However, I included it in the Chinese section because China produces and consumes an incredible amount of pork. Pork is the third most consumed meat in the world. Pork is the most consumed meat in the world. Pork is the #1 consumed meat, then chicken, then beef. Okay? A lot of people think chicken is the most consumed meat, but actually pork is quite a bit higher in yearly tonnage than chicken. So we'll get into that next semester when we get into butchery science. We're going to be a lot more in depth about chicken and pork and beef and fish and shellfish and all that stuff. So don't worry so much about it now. But China is the world leader in pork production and as a country in pork consumption. However, per capita, meaning per person, Poland eats more pork than anybody. That's just per person. But China eats the most pork and grows the most pork. So here is their pork production and pork consumption. Okay, and you can see it's quite a bit bigger than the entire European Union and much bigger than the US. Pork production and pork consumption in China is #1 in the world. However, there's pork meat consumption by country. However, Poland, per person, Poland is the #1 eater of pork in the world. One single Polish person eats more pork than the average Chinese person. Okay? Even though as a country, China eats the most. Okay? But that's because they have 1.4 billion people. So, of course, they're going to eat a lot. Red dates. So this is called red date or jujube. Again, very, very common ingredient in Chinese cuisine and Taiwanese cuisine. This can be picked from the picked from the tree, eaten as is, right, as a fresh red date. But it's very common to see this product dried and used as a snack. Okay, it can be sugared, like dried and sugared, and used as a snack. It can also be dried and then used in salty applications. It's also used in Chinese medicine. Also very commonly found in soups as a flavoring ingredient to add sweetness to a soup. So yeah, the jujube or the red date is used extensively in Chinese cooking and Taiwanese cooking as well. You'll see it in a lot of things here. It can also be made into vinegar, sweet red vinegar. While we're talking about vinegar, rice vinegar. So again, this is a specific type of vinegar. It's used not just in Chinese cooking, but in Asian cuisine in general. Although, if you look at vinegars, for example, used in Japan, they're slightly different than vinegars used in Chinese cuisine and Taiwanese cuisine. So this is made by fermenting rice and a bacteria called acetic bacteria or acetic acid. So acetic acid and rice are fermented to make rice vinegar. Rice vinegar by itself is quite sour, although it's lower in acidity than most Western vinegars. Western vinegars are usually higher in acid than rice vinegar. White rice vinegar is the most acidic of the Chinese vinegars, but it is less acidic than Western vinegars. Black vinegar, which is also common here, right? Black vinegar is used a lot in different applications here as well, especially things like dips or sauces. Black vinegar is made in a similar fashion as white rice vinegar is made by fermenting black glutinous rice with acetic acid. So they're made in the same way, but using a different type of rice. There's also red vinegar, which is made by using koji. Koji is a type of red rice or fermented red rice. You could get 3 different vinegars here: white, black, and red. Again, as I mentioned before when we talked about ginger, very common way to use black vinegar is with xiaolongbao. Red yeast rice, also called koji or fermented red rice, is an Asian rice product developed in China. So this is a fermented red rice. It's a mold that is put on to rice, and the mold turns red as it grows over the rice. This is why it's called fermented red rice or red yeasted rice. The rice grain, once it's been infected with the mold, will start to grow out off the rice, and it will become red or dark purple. This yeasted red rice, or fermented red yeast rice, is used a lot in different sauces. So you can buy in jars tofu, fermented tofu, that has red yeasted rice inside it. So it's a very, very red, very, very thick product. This is also used to make cha sao pork, which I think you guys probably did. Some of you maybe saw yesterday or the day before for the international meet, right? So it's very common to use this for coloring and flavoring of products. Okay? The one thing about this particular product, though, as well, is that there's quite a lot of scientific research has been done that show some negative side effects with having a high intake of koji, because it's got a thing called a mycotoxin, which is not exactly good for you. So some people that have high diets of cha sao pork or other koji-related products or red fermented yeast products do have some negative side effects from that in their diet. But you'd have to eat quite a bit of it. Sichuan peppercorn. This is one of the most recognizable ingredients in Chinese cuisine. It's used in China, it's used in Taiwan, it's used in some other Southeast Asian cuisines as well. This has a spicy, peppery taste and also has a numbing taste to your mouth. So when you eat it, it kind of numbs the inside of your mouth a little bit. And this is due to a molecule called hydroxy alpha essential. So this molecule inside of Sichuan peppercorns, when you eat it, produces a sort of spicy, tingling feeling from the numbingness of your mouth. The plant is native to Taiwan and China. Now it's grown all over the world. Not all over the world, but in many, many places in the world. However, it is not peppercorn, and it's not in the same family as pepper. It's in a similar family as citrus plants. So it doesn't even come from the peppercorn family, or the pepper family. It actually is more closely related to the orange than it is a pepper. So that's Sichuan peppercorns. Soybean. This legume is native to China, but it's used all over Asia, not just in China. Again, soybeans are a large global crop. Oddly enough, China is not the world leader in soybean production. Brazil, the USA, and Argentina produce roughly 80% of the world's soybeans. You would think, because China uses so much soybeans, they would grow their own. Unfortunately, they don't have the right soil or land space to do it. So they grow much less than the USA, Argentina, and Brazil. So they import a lot of their soybeans for making soy sauce and for making other things, soybean oil and stuff like that, from those three countries, the US, Argentina, and Brazil. Of course, this is an integral part of their cuisine because they use it fermented to make soy sauce, right, which is the most important ingredient in probably Asian cuisine. They come into two categories, fermented and unfermented. So again, for making soy sauce, they would use fermented, and for other things, they would use unfermented soybeans. Since we're on the topic of soy sauce and soybeans, here we go, soy sauce. So this is one of the most, if not the most important and widely used ingredient, not just in Chinese cuisine, but in Taiwanese cuisine, Japanese cuisine, Korean cuisine. It's used in many, many different regions of South Asia and Asia. This is made by fermenting soybeans. Once the soybeans are fermented, then it's usually mixed with a wheat product, okay, which is also heated in a similar fashion to when beer is made. That mixture of fermented soybeans and fermented wheat is then put into a brewing machine or a distiller, and it's left to ferment, and it brews similar to how beer brews, right? The bacteria inside starts to eat the wheat, the protein, it produces alcohol, produces salt, and it makes the fermentation. Then it's pressed, so meaning the whole mixture is pressed, so that only the soy sauce, the pure soy sauce comes out. Then it's usually pasteurized for safety, and then it's packaged. Soy sauce usually comes fresh or aged, so you can get a young soy sauce, which is less strong in taste, or an aged soy sauce, which has a much more complex taste. Or you can get low sodium soy sauce nowadays, right? Because people have health issues, right, or health conditions, or health concerns, so you get soy sauce that has a low sodium, so less salt. You can also get light soy sauce, meaning that it's much lighter in color, less strong in taste. Or you can get dark soy sauce, which is much stronger in taste and used for coloring and also flavoring. Taro, again, another very, very common product. This is a flowering tropical plant. Again, it's part of the tuber family, right? T-U-B-E-R, the tuber family, growing underground with leaves growing above ground for sunlight. This is used in many different applications in Taiwanese and Chinese cuisine. It's used in stews, so when they make stewed products, stewed chicken, stewed pork, they'll throw in taro as a starch component. You can make chips out of it. It's made into dim sum, so the stuffing or filling for dim sum. Sweet desserts and in bubble tea. So taro bubble tea is also a common thing. 1,000-year egg, or called pidan. You guys have all had pidan before? Yeah? So again, pidan is a very acquired taste. When I first got to Taiwan, I was like, what is that? And I was like, oh, that's a pidan. I was like, that doesn't explain anything. That just gives me a name. I was like, what animal did that egg come from? Like, I've never seen an egg like that before. Anyways, now I love them. I wouldn't eat one straight, right? Eating one by itself is a bit, for me, that's, that's a bit hardcore even for me. But with something else, like a little tofu, maybe some dried fish skin, bonito, it's great, So basically this an egg that's been buried underground, traditionally buried underground, and then it's a mixture of clay, ash, and salt, and quicklime, or calcium hydroxide, also known as slaked lime, and rysol. And what happens is they sort of bury it underground in this mixture of clay and salt and slaked lime for a few months. And then what happens is that the egg yolk and the egg white become gelatinous. So a chemical reaction happens, and the egg white turns sort of a dark, kind of a sort of a brown color, becomes clear, very, very clear. It has a very strong ammonia smell. So like when you clean the windows with, Magic Ama, the window cleaner, like Windex, that ammonia smell, very, very strong. And then also because of the chemical reaction, the inside yolk part turns kind of a greenish gray color, and it becomes very creamy. So almost like you've half cooked the egg yolk, it becomes very creamy, but it's only because of a chemical reaction between the salt, clay, and the calcium hydroxide. Okay, there's an intense chemical reaction. Remember that eggshells are not, they're not 100% sealed, right? They're porous, meaning things can go in and out, right? An eggshell is not like some magical defense shield, okay? It's very fragile, it's very porous, so flavors and smells can go in and out. Chemicals can go in and out past that shell, and so you get an incredible chemical reaction between the calcium hydroxide and the sulfur and the protein inside the egg. And that's what turns it this color. Now, of course, nowadays they do it more of a chemical way. Okay, they don't obviously nowadays, because these are very popular now worldwide. When I grew up in Canada, we didn't have this. You know what I mean? Now, they're everywhere. And so I would like go back to Canada, like eat and be like, what the hell? Anyways, so yeah, that's a pidan or a century egg. Okay. And again, like I said, these eating them plain. Do you guys eat them straight? Like, yeah, sometimes. But usually it's got something on it, right? Like you would never just like open an egg and eat it, right? You would. You're badass, most people I see when they eat them, it's usually there's something on it, like a little ginger or a little something, or it's cooked into a dish. for example, Sanbei pidang is very common, right? So like the Sanbei chicken, they do the 3 cups, and instead of chicken, they throw in the century egg with the basil and all that. Excellent, absolutely amazing. But it's got a very, very strong taste. So if you don't like strong taste, this is probably not for you. Tilapia, this is a super common fish, very, very common in Taiwan. This is the most farmed fish in the world. There's no other fish on planet Earth that's been farmed as much as tilapia. I hate tilapia. Absolutely hate it. In fact, I would rather eat nothing than eat tilapia. I would rather eat century eggs for a day than eat tilapia for a meal. Okay? Tilapia for me is the worst. But unfortunately, because of overfishing, wild tilapia is hard to find and it's expensive. Okay? Tilapia is an interesting fish because it has a short life cycle. You can, from an egg, the egg stage of a tilapia to its sort of its catchability, the size you want to catch it at, only takes a few months. So the product recycle, right? You can grow a full cycle of tilapia in less than half a year, meaning that if you have a fish farm and you want to make money, right? And tilapia is really popular because A, it's cheap, B, it's got like no taste. It's like drinking water. Just like did I eat fish? What's that?
The flavor is so soft.
There's no flavor. It's got nothing. There's nothing to it. So it's really popular because it's an extremely mild fish. It's extremely abundant because it's fished like crazy, or farmed like crazy, which makes it very, very cheap. So this is used in a lot of different dishes here, mostly because of its cost. China, Taiwan, Indonesia, and the Philippines, again, are the world leaders in tilapia farming. China, obviously, #1. But you can see this fish in any supermarket you go to. You go to PX Mart, tilapia. You go to Carrefour, tilapia. Soon, you're going to go to 7-Eleven, tilapia. Okay? Just wait, a matter of time, and they're going to have tilapia. Probably frozen. They probably have tilapia in the freezer right now. It's everywhere. Tofu. Oh, here we go. Tofu again. Excuse me. Very, very, again, another staple ingredient, similar to like South America. Corn, potatoes. Tofu is quintessential part of not just Chinese cuisine and Taiwanese cuisine, but it's also used extensively in Korea and Japan and other areas of Asia, although it was first made in China. So this is a similar process to how cheese is made. They take soy milk, they separate it, right, the curd from the whey, then they press the curd into tofu blocks. Okay? Tofu comes in a variety of different forms. You can get silky tofu, which is very, very smooth and creamy, or you can get, like here, extra firm tofu that has all the water pressed out of it and it's become very, very compact. So depending on what you're going to make, you need to use the appropriate tofu. If you're going to make something stir-fried and use silky tofu, you're going to end up with a mushy mess, right? This is one of the most common or one of the most famous dishes, mapo tofu, made out of tofu. This is one of the greatest dishes ever created in the history of mankind, okay? In the universe, in the history of the universe, the galaxy, okay? Mapo tofu is basically ground beef or pork, koji rice or fermented red rice, soy sauce, chilies, lots of tofu, although now it's really common to find it vegetarian, because a lot of people think that this should be a vegetarian dish because it's a tofu-based dish. So once you throw meat into it, it kind of takes the point out of making it at all. So, anyways, very, very integral part, tofu. Oh, there we go. All right, we're going to take a 5-minute break, stretch your legs, get some water, then we're going to get into a little bit of Japan and Korea, and then we'll quickly run through your final project. This so tired. So tired. So tired of the week. I suppose. All right, wake up. Rise and shine. We'll get about 20 minutes of South Korea and Japan in, and then we'll move on to your final project. I'll go through quickly with your final project for you so you understand. It's also on your e-learning, so you'll have to look at it yourself as well, just to make sure that you know what's going on. So both countries, both Japan and South Korea, have had a lot of external influence in their cuisine. mainly from China, just because that's the way history worked out. Before China brought rice to Japan, they didn't have rice. Okay? Also things like Japanese curry. Everyone knows Japanese curry, right? That was brought to Japan by the British during World War I and II. Then, of course, they modified it to make it more their own. Even something like tempura. Tempura, everyone thinks tempura is Japanese, but actually it was brought to Japan by Portuguese sailors. And the name itself, tempura, has to do with the Knights Templar, which is an old religious thing, like these old these knights that like fought, you know. Watch Transformers. That's all you need to know about the Knights Templar. So anyways, they have a lot of diverse histories in terms of their food. As I mentioned, you know, things like ramen, right? Ramen, people always associate Japan with ramen, but actually ramen noodles are from China. Prior to the Japanese coming to Japan, they had no rice. Before that, they just ate fish and vegetables, right? Rice wasn't even part of their diet. And now, of course, you look at sushi, right? Sushi is one of the most, if not the most famous thing in Japanese cuisine, based around rice, right? Or one of the most important aspects of sushi is rice, right? But without the Chinese influence bringing rice to Japan, they wouldn't have it, right? Mandu, a really popular Korean dumpling. Again, this was brought to Korea by Mongolians. Okay, so when the Mongols invaded China, and then they made their way south and off to the Korean Peninsula, they brought a variety of different Mongolian and Chinese ingredients and techniques with them into Korea. Mandu, the dumpling, which is bigger than a traditional dumpling, like a Chinese dumpling or Taiwanese dumpling. Mandu is quite a bit bigger usually, but that was believed to have been introduced to their culture by Mongolians through China. Also, Japan now is the world leader in Michelin star restaurants. Japan has more Michelin star restaurants than any other country in the world, right? So their cuisine is really elevated beyond a lot of other countries. So let's get into some ingredients here. Amanatsu, this is very similar to a mandarin orange, although it's bigger than a mandarin orange. This would be sort of a similar fruit to Japanese culture as the mandarin orange is to a Chinese culture. The Amanatsu grows in the area of Yamaguchi. It can be eaten fresh or made into marmalades, like spreads, or it can be turned into alcohol. A very common thing in Japan is to make an Amanatsu alcohol. This particular orange has a very rough outer skin. So a mandarin orange is very smooth, right? This particular orange is very rough and kind of texture on the outside. So it's quite a little bit different in that respect. But it's still quite sweet. So yeah, that's an Amanatsu. Really, really common fruit in Japan. Dashi. So dashi would be to Japan as master stock is to China. Master stock in Chinese cuisine is the building block for many other dishes. Okay? Dashi is the same thing. Dashi is a stock or a soup base. Dashi is used to make a lot of other things. For example, what's a really common thing? You know the Japanese steamed custard, the egg custard they have in Japanese cooking? You never heard of that? It's called chawanmushi. It's an egg custard, right? You usually get it at like Sushi Express or something like that. It's a little custard, you eat it. Usually it's got maybe a clam in it or some seafood. That is made using dashi and eggs. So they mix dashi and eggs, and they put it into a container, they steam it, and that's what we call chawanmushi. Okay? Very, very common dish in Japanese cuisine. So the basic recipe for dashi would be kombu, which is dried seaweed, and katsuobushi or bonito, which is dried tuna skin, okay, or dried shaved tuna. So basically you bring some water to a boil, you take your kombu, you put it in, you let it sit for about 10-15 minutes, then you add your bonito flakes, you let that sit for about another 10-15 minutes, like tea. When you make tea, you let it steep, right? Then you strain it. And so what you're left with is sort of a light green stock that has a taste of the ocean, from the kombu, the seaweed, a little bit of saltiness, and then also a little light fishiness from the tuna skin, okay, the bonito or katsuobushi, okay? Yes.
MSG, right? The common,
Yeah.
have no regional MSG.
Yes. Well, not really. I mean, MSG, I mean, that's just salt. It's just sea salt. But they used, yeah, sort of, kind of, but it's, MSG is like way past that. So dashi, again, the basic recipe for dashi is just kombu and katsuobushi, although sometimes you can get the addition of sardine heads, other dried fish, or dried mushrooms. Okay, so it's common to add other ingredients in to elevate the flavor if you want to make something specific out of it. But in a traditional Japanese kitchen, they would just make a large pot of dashi and use that for a variety of different things. Okay? But this is very, very important. As I said, this would be like master stock to Chinese cuisine. Dashi is to Japanese cuisine. Okay? Very, very important role. Gochugaru, this is a widely used type of Korean chili powder. You know, Koreans typically like to have quite spicy food, or you can get very spicy dishes in Korean cuisine. Obviously not all Koreans like spicy food, but Koreans do generally like to have some dishes that are incredibly spicy. So gochugaru is the Korean red chili. Again, not native there. It was brought over, and then through years and years of growing it, they've made a very unique type of chili. Okay? Similar to the chilies used in Chinese cuisine. They were brought over, and then through years of propagation and growing, they have their own unique chilies. So gochugaru is used in a variety of different dishes in a variety of different ways. When you go to a market, this is actually a photo I took when I lived in Korea at the market. This was like 10, 15 feet from my house. So I just like walked down, it's like just spices in the air, you know. I was always crying when I walked by. I'd get to school crying, like, what happened? I was by the market. Basically, when you go to a Korean market, you'll find large tubs of chilies. And again, like, this is how much chili they use. You know, this is like in a day, it's gone. But you'll find two varieties, all made from the same chili. You'll usually find it coarse or very fine. So depending on what they're going to make, for example, if they're going to make kimchi, they tend to use more of a coarse chili flake, okay? Because they don't want to dissolve too much into the kimchi. In your fourth year here, if you take, I teach a class on global cooking, so we'll actually make our own kimchi. So we'll actually do a lot of different, when people think about kimchi, they always think cabbage, okay? But cabbage is one type of kimchi. Kimchi is a family of products, right? So it's similar to like appetizers. There's no one specific appetizer. Appetizer is a family of dishes, right? At any rate, in your fourth year, we'll make a whole bunch of different fermented Korean-style dishes like kimchi, cabbage kimchi. We'll make pickled or fermented daikon. We'll do Korean barbecue. We'll make samjang. A whole bunch of different Korean dishes. So we'll actually be using a lot of gochugaru in that. Of course. Gochujang, so this is a very traditional Korean red chili paste made from gochugaru. Again, this is a fermented chili powder, the gochugaru that we talked about just now. It's fermented with glutinous rice, some soybean, barley, salt, and then what the resulting product is a very thick paste, very thick red spicy paste. This gochujang is used in a lot of different things, such as marinade for example, bulgogi beef, bulgogi is a style of making beef in Korea. So they use this gochujang they never use it just straight, okay? You wouldn't see a Korean person just like dip some pork into gochujang and be like, all right, this is good, right? That's not gonna happen. You might see like a foreign guy being like, right? Because we're stupid, we don't know what we're doing. This is used to make other things, okay? It's never used straight. Okay, so they always add it to marinades, they add it to soups, they add it to dips, okay? One of the most famous dishes in Korean barbecue is made using gochujang, okay? And this is very easy to find now. You can find this in Taiwan so easily now, okay? So it's a very, very common product, a huge export from Taiwan, or from Korea, huge export. So that's gochujang. So both Japan and Korea, obviously being island, well, Japan, island nation, Korea having a peninsula, being mostly coastal, right? Most of Korea is all coastal waters. The only part attached to land is the DMZ, which is attached to North Korea. So there's not a lot of fishing going on there. Okay, fishing for bullets maybe, but there isn't a lot of action going on that side. So most of Korea is basically all coastline, right? So there's lots of fishing. Also, they have an island, Jeju Island. Also, a lot of fishing there. So they use tons of fish there. So we're going to get into some of the different fish. One of the common ones here is called amberjack. This one is sometimes referred to as yellowtail because the tail can be very, very brightly yellow colored. Now this should not be confused with yellowfin tuna, okay? There's yellowtail or amberjack. In Japan they call this hamachi, okay? So in Japan hamachi is quite a high level fish, quite an expensive fish, used a lot for sashimi. And this is a saltwater round fatty fish. So it's got a very fatty content, similar to tuna, which is why it's prized for use in sashimi. This is found in the Pacific waters around Japan, Korea, up north in the Bering Strait by Russia. Okay, so all that sort of northern Pacific area up to the Arctic, you will find things like hamachi up there. Okay, very, 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 very fatty. So meaning that it's got a high fat content running through its meat. Okay, similar to like tuna belly. Usually when you see it, you'll have a red tip right here. That's part of the blood vein, or the blood trail that goes to the fish. So they'll remove most of that, but usually for sashimi they leave a little bit on because it has a very sort of an iron taste. I don't know how to describe that really. Yeah, the blood taste, right? You know when you go for Chinese food, you eat the duck blood. You know, duck blood hot pot. You know, the thick case of duck blood. It's got that sort of iron taste, that metallic taste. Anyways, that's the taste they want. Okay, so they leave a little bit of that on to get that iron taste, that tinny taste. So that's called amberjack or yellowtail. Ayu or sweet fish. This is a species of freshwater fish. Again, this is a really popular fish in both Japan and Korea. It's a freshwater fish, round, it's got a very mild taste, very, very delicate flesh. They tend to use this fish for Japanese barbecue. Okay? So they don't really do a lot to it when they cook it. They just put a little bit of salt on it and barbecue it directly. And then they sort of want that natural taste. It's really common after this fish has been barbecued, they put a little bit of citrus on it. Okay, like yuzu or calamansi, which is a very small citrus fruit. So that's called ayu or sweet fish. Eel, of course, Japanese eel, very, very popular worldwide. So the Japanese eel is considered to be sort of the best species of eel. And again, this is not native only to Japan. It's found in the waters around Japan, Korea, China, Taiwan, Vietnam even. But the Japanese eel, as it's called, is one of the better eels for cooking. So when you go out for Japanese food, they'll specify usually what type of eel you're getting, and of course the price will be dictated by the type of eel you're getting. So Japanese eel would be the best. Another couple that you can find is pike or conger eel and dagger tooth. So the pike conger eel is sort of the second level. So if you don't get true Japanese eel, for example, when you get the little rice box with the grilled eel on top, if you get the Japanese eel, it's very expensive. If you get the conger eel, it's slightly less expensive. You would probably never find dagger tooth eel used for that because it's not really that great. Dagger tooth eel would be used for things like fish cakes or even pickled eel because it's a cheaper application. Okay. So again, there's the wonderful grilled Japanese eel right there. Wonderful, wonderful stuff. Have you all eaten eel before? Yeah, I'm sure, yeah. It's very, very common. Puffer fish. So this is one of the most famous things from Japan. Also Korea eats it a lot. It's a big part of the Korean diet as well, but most people associate puffer fish with Japanese cuisine. So this particular fish is extremely popular in sashimi, right, in Japanese cuisine. However, it has to be prepared incredibly carefully. In Japan, it takes roughly 10 to 15 years to become certified as a professional pufferfish sashimi chef. Okay? If it is done improperly, the skin, the organs like the liver, have a very powerful toxin in them, and you can die from eating wrong parts of pufferfish sashimi. It's extremely rare that that happens nowadays because the certification and the training is very, very intense. Although Japan used to have a problem because Japan has homeless people. I mean, everywhere has homeless people. But the difference is that homeless people in a lot of countries will go to the garbage can looking for food, right? In most countries, they don't throw deadly fish into the garbage can, right? So what happens, what used to happen, is that homeless Japanese people would go looking for food. They would find this in the garbage, eat some, dead. So now, as a regulation in Japan, all restaurants that serve pufferfish have a separate container that's locked. Only pufferfish goes in there, and then a certified government vehicle that has the same key will come and collect the pufferfish and dispose of it properly. I don't know why they didn't think about that. Like, where do you want to put this deadly fish? Ah, just throw it outside. Who cares? Well, some people care. I like that we all have a good laugh about that.
Some cats.
Well, nobody cares about cats. I love cats. But at any rate, so that is pufferfish, okay? Very, very prized, very expensive part of sashimi. Tuna, also incredibly popular, not just in Japanese cuisine, but also worldwide. Tuna is a major part of the sashimi and sushi repertoire of dishes. So there's obviously more than one type of tuna used, right? There's not just one kind of tuna. So we get into a few different ones here. This is called the albacore tuna. This is a very, very abundant tuna found in the Atlantic Ocean and the Pacific Ocean, both north and south. When we talk about tuna, usually they're north and south in terms of hemisphere, right? The northern hemisphere and the southern hemisphere. Albacore tuna, sorry, I should say. It's an abundant fish. It's cheaper in value, but it's still widely used in Japanese cuisine and in other areas. We use it a lot in Canada because we get it a lot there, and so we use it quite a lot in different ways. It's often used for canning. Okay, so canned tuna is often made from albacore tuna, as well as another kind of tuna we're getting into shortly. So albacore tuna has a much whiter flesh than regular tuna. When people think of tuna, they think of that sort of purple red, you know, that really nice purple red tuna color. Albacore tuna is much, much more white. It's a very, very pink looking tuna, which is why it's not so popular in Japanese cuisine. It's still used, but not as much. And it's also used commercially a lot because of its off color. People associate tuna with the red color, and when they see this, they're like, oh, that's not tuna, even though it is. So that's albacore tuna. Bluefin tuna, this is the most, one of the most prized fish. So this is the Pacific bluefin tuna. These tunas are extremely big. They're very, very quintessential red flesh, like we talked about, right? So when people think of tuna, they think of this kind of color, right? That really nice, deep red color. Now, of course, this is from the upper section right about here, okay? And then as we get to the belly section, there's different parts, okay? There's 3 parts to the belly, which we'll get into in butchery class. The most expensive bluefin tuna ever purchased was in 2019. It was a 280 kilogram tuna, so around 500 pounds, give or take, and that was purchased for 87 million NT dollars, which is around 25 million US. Yeah, or no, 3 million US, sorry. 3 million US, sorry. My conversion rate was off there. Roughly 3 million US dollars for one fish. And that was purchased by a very large Japanese sushi company. And then, of course, they have a huge tuna promotion where they have the, you know, it's the most expensive fish ever purchased, right? So yeah, tuna is a very, very big business. If someone's willing to pay $3 million for one fish, very expensive. So that's the bluefin Pacific tuna. Then we have skipjack. Here we go. So this is skipjack tuna. This is, again, another widely used type of tuna. Its flesh is less red, as you can see, than the bluefin tuna, but more red than the albacore tuna. So again, skipjack is commonly used because it's got a nice texture, nice flavor, good fat content. It's not as expensive as the bluefin tuna, but it's still a good product. Okay? It's used a lot in Hawaiian cuisine as well because it's widely fished in Hawaii. And this is used to make katsuobushi. Katsuobushi is the dried tuna skin that we use to make dashi. In Taiwanese and Chinese cuisine, they often sprinkle it on top of tofu or century eggs, for example. They use it as a garnish quite often. So that's skipjack tuna. Yellowfin tuna. As I mentioned, this is not to be confused with yellowtail fish or hamachi. This is yellowfin tuna. Okay? So the difference is the yellowtail fish, okay, or the hamachi, has a yellowtail only. Okay? The bluefin tuna, you can see it's got much bigger fins coming from all over it, and they're all yellow. It usually also has a very strong yellow coloration on the top, as well as small fins running up the back side and the top side that are also yellow. Okay? So that's how it's distinguished by its difference, is that it's yellow fins, yellow skin. So this one can come in sushi grade and other grades. Sushi grade being the higher quality, which is used for sushi. Again, this is not as red as bluefin tuna. So this is considered sort of the second best tuna. Okay? So yellowtail is considered still a good quality tuna, but it's at a lower price point. So if you don't want to spend the money on, and bluefin tuna can be very expensive. You know, I think the last time, a fish market not too far from here, it's called Donggang. Last time I was there, I got some yellow or some bluefin tuna belly, and I think it was about 120 NT for one piece. So it was like I had 3 pieces together, right? It's $500. I was like, damn it. At any rate, it's used a lot in commercial sushi restaurants, chain sushi restaurants, because it's acceptable to the customer, right? Customers see it, they think, oh, it's good quality. And for the operation, it's good because it's a lower price point, right? So this is one of the more common ones to see because it's accepted by both consumer and operational, okay? And, oh, there's so many tuna. Oh, okay, that's it for our tuna, okay? Our yellowfin there, that's the last of our tunas. Furikake, this is a Japanese condiment made of dried fish, sesame seeds, chopped seaweed, a little bit of sugar, and some salt, and this is often sprinkled as a garnish on rice. So quite often when you go to restaurants in Japan, or Japanese restaurants abroad, they will give you rice, and you might see this on your table, okay? And this is used just to sprinkle on your rice to give it a little bit of extra flavor, okay? And this gives it that sort of seaweedy, salty, fishy taste that people like to have with their rice, okay? So furikake is a condiment or a side dish that we use. As I mentioned before, katsuobushi. Again, this is the dried tuna skin, okay, that we use for making dashi, or that we use as a garnish on different dishes. Sometimes it's referred to as bonito. Okay, so bonito and katsuobushi are not the same thing. Katsuobushi is better quality, made from skipjack, and bonito is made from other fish. Okay, so if you see a different pricing, then you'll know that if it's very cheap, it's probably bonito. It's made from a different fish. But if it's labeled as katsuobushi, it has to be made from skipjack tuna. Okay? If it's not called katsuobushi, then it's probably made from a different fish, okay? Or a mixture of different fish. Again, this is a really crucial ingredient in Japanese cuisine. So that's katsuobushi or bonito. Kimchi, of course. So this is a photo I took when I lived in Korea. This is a friend of mine took me to this is actually a family's house. And they make kimchi for the whole town, the whole village. So kimchi is a dish made from fermented vegetables that use a brine of salt and spices, ginger, garlic, chili pepper. The most common type of kimchi is, of course, cabbage. And that's made using Napa cabbage. Okay? You can't just use any cabbage you want to make kimchi. You need to use a specific type of cabbage. Kimchis are usually served with every single meal. So when I lived in Korea, when I got breakfast, kimchi. When I got lunch, kimchi. When I got dinner, guess what? Kimchi. My dreams, kimchi. My nightmares, kimchi. At any rate, we will make, in your 4th year, we'll make kimchi. It takes a few weeks to make, so we usually start it in the 2nd week. You know here the class schedule, how it works, right? The first week, there's not really any lab classes. It's kind of a waste of time, which I can't stand. And then the last week is always cleaning. So really, 18 weeks is really only 16 weeks. At any rate, we start in the 4th year, in the 2nd week, we'll start making kimchi, and then we'll let it ferment for a few weeks before we refrigerate it. And then we eat it about a month later, okay? So we'll make a bunch of different kimchis in your 4th year if you take that course. Kombu. So as I mentioned, as we talked about before with dashi, this is the other 2nd ingredient of dashi. So this is large kelp that's been dried. The drying process brings the salt to the surface. And as Andy mentioned, this is sort of the precursor to MSG. Japanese and Koreans and Chinese were able to start scraping this salt off and realized its intense saltiness, and then they kind of converted this into monosodium glutamate, which is what it is now. Kombu is used in a dry version like this to make dashi, and in a semi-dry or fresh state to use as salads or garnishes on different dishes. So that's kombu, and that's a specific type of kelp or seaweed. Korean radish. As I mentioned before, we talked about the Chinese boho, okay, the white carrot. So these are used in Korean cooking as well. However, the Chinese or the daikon in Taiwan, for example, is quite a bit longer. It's more skinny or a single rounded shape. It's more of a uniform white color. It's also a little bit more watery than the Korean radish. Korean radish is more compact. It's also quite a bit more green throughout the whole thing. And its texture is a little more dry than the Chinese or the daikon. And the Korean radish is a bit more dry than the Chinese radish. So that is the Korean radish. All right, we're going to stop there today, and then I want to run through quickly with you the year-end final project for you. Because as I said, only a few of you have bothered to read it. I think last time I checked, it was 6 people. Due date, January 7th. Oh, 2022, sorry. I don't know why I didn't bring that. Yeah. Let me just update this. And actually, I'll update it on your file as well. All right. Oh, that's much better. Come on. All right. So this would be, I think, in week 16? Week 16, I believe this is, or week 17? I always do things in the weeks, you know, the semester in the weeks. Let me just double check. I believe that's week 16 or 17. So that's week 17, okay? So that gives you about 5 weeks, give or take, to get this done, okay? So now you have your hygiene project, right? You have about 5 weeks to do that. And you have your study of ingredients project, also you have about 5 weeks, okay? So that should be more than enough time to get these done. All right, so your final project will be to study a culture's cuisine, okay? So you want to find a culture or a country, look at its cuisine, okay? And you want to study one that's been influenced by a minimum of 2 external cultures or cuisines, okay? And I use those terms kind of interchangeably because 2 countries can have similar cuisines, right? So, for example, Vietnam, okay? Vietnam has a very unique cuisine, okay? However, it's been extensively influenced by countries like the Netherlands and France, okay? You all have had a sandwich from Vietnam before, banh mi, right? Very famous sandwich, right? Probably when people think of Vietnamese cuisine, they think of 2 things. Pho, the soup, right? The noodle soup, and banh mi, right? The sandwich. But that's on a French baguette, right? So that's, that's a clear example of extreme influence where another country has come into another country and left behind something that's been adapted by their country, okay? So, and there's lots of examples of this, right? Japan, right? China has influenced Japan greatly. Portuguese, the British, so there's lots of different ways you can go about this. America, America is nothing but external influences, right? American cuisine is influenced by Italian cuisine, Spanish cuisine, African cuisine, Chinese cuisine. I mean, Chinese-American cuisine is so different than Chinese cuisine, you know what I mean? Chinese-American cuisine is actually a recognized cuisine of itself, right? For example, something like lemon chicken, right? You don't get that in China. In America, it's like this thick, lemony stuff, right? So Chinese-American cuisine is a unique cuisine unto itself, okay? So there's different ways to approach this project, but there's also lots of different countries that have been influenced by other countries, okay? So you need a minimum of 2, okay? If you wanted to add 3 or 4, no, I'm not looking for specific dishes. I'm looking for specific examples, okay? So your report needs to go into detail for each of the 2 external influences regarding when and how the cuisine is impacted or changed. So when you identify one country that you want to do, and you identify the different external countries that have come in and changed or added or brought in different ingredients or techniques or whatever it may be to that culture, then you need to look at the when and the how. When did they come to this country? How did they impact the cuisine? Was it, and some of it's different, right? For example, when the Dutch came to Japan, it wasn't in a military presence, right? It was more of an exploratory presence, right? The Dutch came to Japan, they were like, hey, what's up? We're from the Dutch, we're from the Netherlands, yeah. Here's some stuff. When the Spanish go to some countries, they're like, hey, we're from Spain. Give us your gold, right? So there's different ways that countries go about going to other countries, okay? For example, the same thing with Vietnam. The French controlled Vietnam for a long time. The Dutch controlled it in a less totalitarian way, right? So look at a bit of the history about how that country went into that country. What was their goal? What was their purpose? When they did it? What was the ramifications? What happened? Why did they leave? Go into detail, okay? Examine what happened and when it happened. Again, as you were asking about, 2 dishes, I'm not talking about 2 or 3 dishes, I'm talking about 2 or 3 countries, right? So for example, America, you have Italy, you have Germany, you have Africa, you have Spain, you have France, and there's all these countries came to America.
But you are talking about the influence in one country.
Yeah, so you have one country.
With different influences.
No, I'm talking about one country that has been influenced by other countries. Okay? Make sense? Yeah, so you have your country, whatever it is, not your country, but you pick a country, and then you look at those influences and how they happened. What happened, what brought them there, what they did, when did they leave, add details, okay? You're going to want to provide definitive examples of the influences with regards to ingredients, techniques, or dishes. So this is where you would include things like recipes or cooking techniques or ingredients that other countries brought in, okay? Something like garlic. Would that be a definitive thing? Probably not, because garlic's used everywhere around the world, right? For example, Spain, okay? The Arab invasion came to Spain, they brought saffron with them. So that would be a definitive ingredient, because Spain is very unique. Saffron is very unique, right? It's not used globally. I mean, it is now, but It's not part of every culture's cuisine, right? Garlic is used all over the country, all over the world, in every cuisine, right? Saffron is very unique to Spanish culture, very unique to Spanish cuisine, because it was brought there, okay? So that's what I mean by like really exact, really definitive things, okay? Really detailed examples of how that culture, your culture, right? Culture A, your home base, how it was influenced, how it was affected, how it was changed. Also look at how those ingredients, techniques, and processes were adapted or modified by the locals. So again, going back to Vietnam, the French introduced baguettes to Vietnamese. Okay? After the French left, the Vietnamese changed the baguettes to make them more unique to their own culture. Okay? The Vietnamese changed the formula. They don't use just bread flour. They use bread flour and rice flour now to make a banh mi baguette. Okay? But the French, when they came to Vietnam, they didn't know rice flour or anything. They were like, oh. So they just showed them this is how we make a baguette. And then their French left, and those Vietnamese were like, thought those guys would never leave. Okay, let's put some rice flour in here. Let's make it our own way, right? And so the technique of making a baguette was introduced to them, and then once that influence was gone, they were like, all right, let's modify this a bit. Because a Vietnamese baguette and a French baguette are very different, okay? They have the same outside crustiness, but the inside is quite different. Baguettes are very chewy, you know, you have to wrestle with it like a wild dog, whereas a Vietnamese baguette is a little crunchy on the outside, but quite tender on the inside. As you research your country, cuisine, look for details, look for facts, look for historical events, look for people, right? Add specific details, specific events, specific things to your report, okay? Make it focused, okay? Your project should be in APA format, okay? If you don't know what it is, what's the easiest way to find out? Thank you. Google. So APA format, okay? Google it if you don't know what it is. APA format is a very specific set of rules regarding format, type size, and spacing. Okay? So just Google it. It will give you a very defined list of what is APA. Okay? This is also on your e-learning already. I'm going to remove it and put it back on today with 2022 because I don't want somebody going like, hey, the thing said 2021. I'll say, yeah, you're a year late. Again, there is no minimum amount of words. Okay? However, your amount of effort will determine your grade to an extent. If you provide the bare minimum of information, you'll get the bare minimum of passing grades. Okay? If you provide good information, good details, good examples, examples of recipes, you can include YouTube links, you can include other kinds of multimedia that will take me to other things, videos, like this is an example of a dish they make, and here's a video, great. I'll click the link, I'll go watch the video, right? So feel free to include additional things like that. Again, I'm not going to set a minimum amount of work for you. You're adults, right? You decide how much work you want to put into this project, and I will then take that amount of work and formulate a grade for you based on that work, right? You're only going to get what you put in. The project will be graded out of a possible 200 points, 75 points for each of the sections on the influencing countries based on the information, examples, ingredients, techniques, dishes. So the amount of work you put in will determine how much out of 75 you get. 30 points will be based on following the proper format. So if you're not using APA format, you'll get a very low mark out of 30. Spelling. Every computer in the world can do spell check for you. Except, for some reason, some of you, for your midterm, didn't use spell check. I don't know why. Very strange. Because when you spell something incorrectly, what happens? It's a line. So when I open up your projects, not all of you, obviously, but some of you, it's like line, 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 line. I was like, what's going on here? So make sure you're checking your spelling, make sure you're checking your grammar. This can all be done using a computer. So that will be 30 points. 20 points will be for additional creative touches. So as I just mentioned, if you just kind of list everything, fine. If you put in links, if you put in some photos, if you put in other multimedia things, visual things, something like that, great. You will get extra points for creativity. Okay? So 75 is 150, 30 is 180, and 20 is 200. Okay? Projects need to be sent via email in Word format only. My email address is right there. File name, SOI, comma, final project, comma, name, comma, number, student number. No spacing, no nothing, no capitals, no all capitals. Just copy this, paste it into your final name, and then change the appropriate information. All right? First name only in English, please. I think I received some people's projects with their full name, right? I don't need all that. Just one name is fine. Okay? Also, not in Chinese, because I think I received 2 people's projects that were in their Chinese name. I also don't need that. I just need your student number and your first name. Okay? In this format. No spacing, no capitals, except for the first ones that are already capitalized. Emails not formatted and typed in a professional manner will be deleted immediately, and I will not send you a reply this time. I think many of you, raise your hand if you've got a reply from me saying this email is not typed properly. Raise your hand if you, more than that, come on. More than that, raise your hand, be truthful, don't lie. Okay. Well, don't lie though, because that's the worst. But I know there's more than that. More than half of you got an email. Email is not formatted, typed properly, will be deleted. I will not send you a reminder that you need to do it properly, because you already been told now a couple times. Files not labeled properly will also be deleted. Got it? Now you might be wondering, why is Professor so mean? Why is he so mean? Why do we have to label everything properly? Why do we have to write email properly? And I'll tell you why. Because if I give you a recipe, you can't follow the direction on a recipe. This is a simple direction, right? I'm giving you a direction. A very easy one, right? All you have to do is copy and paste and then change your name, change your number, right? That's all you have to do, right? If you get a recipe from someone, and we were learning to cook, right? If you get a recipe and you can't follow a simple instruction like this, what are you going to do with the recipe? You can ask the 2A students how I get when they don't follow the recipes, or they don't weigh the recipe properly. I get very, very angry. Very angry. Because if you can't even weigh a recipe or follow the direction correctly, how do you think that recipe is going to turn out? Good or bad? Bad, right? Very, very bad. In hot cooking, you have some flexibility. Okay, you have room for some mistake. Unless you're working at like a Michelin star level, then you have no room for mistake. Baking and pastry, there is no room for mistake. If you mess up a recipe, if you weigh something incorrectly, that recipe will not work. Okay? Baking and pastry is a chemical reaction. It's a science. The artistry, cooking is 60%, 70% science, and 30% art. Really, right? Baking and pastry, it's all chemical reactions, right? Miller, you're in the baking and pastry program, right? Yeah? So what happens when someone doesn't weigh the recipe properly? Does the recipe work? No. And what happens when they don't follow the correct procedure? Does the recipe work? No. Because it is a chemical reaction. You have to follow everything precisely. Okay? So this is my way of getting you all to start learning how to follow directions, pay attention, listen to what you're being told, right? It has to start somewhere. If I wait until we actually get to the kitchen, it's too late. Okay? So I'm not doing this to be mean. I'm doing this to get you to think. I have to read the directions. I have to read what I'm doing. I have to make sure I'm doing it correctly. Okay? That's why. Okay? There's a reason to what I'm doing. Okay? I'm not doing like, when I go back to the office, like, hey Doug, guess what I made you do today? No, that's not what happens. Alright? I mean a little bit. A little bit. I go back to the office, I'm like, but not really. Alright, anyways, that's it for today. Please read this on your own time. I'm going to delete off e-learning very temporarily today when I change the due date to 2021. So I'll remove it, put it back up. But read it. If you have any questions, please ask. Okay? We'll see you guys at 1:20 for hygiene and safety. Alright, thank you very much. Hi, Esther. Hi, Esther.
Gracias.